Prabhupada ki jai, Balaram ki jai. Nandi. So today we're reading from A God Who Dances. Yeah. And we're on chapter 21. I don't know how many verses I'm supposed to do. How many verses? The whole thing? Okay, all right. So on chapter 21, it's Lord Balaram's visits to Vrindavan. Oh, we look like you.
Many actually, 21.
We just said chapter 21.
Cyril it says 21.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Vasudevaya. Want to do this one together? Naranam Namaskri. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, to serve every means of Congress, one should offer respectful obeisances unto the personality of Godhead, now unto Nanda, the superimposed human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, unto the author, to Prabhupada, translator and commentator, by regular attendance in classes on the Bhagavatam, and by rendering service unto the devotees, all others come to the heart and by service unto the Godhead, pray and transcend the irrevocable fact. So what do you remember about King Riga? Just thought I'd start just that, since I was more prepared to talk about King Riga, and I found out it's the wrong chapter. Yes, Prabhu. King Riga, we need a microphone in the back. Thanks.
Well, he was pious and he gave a lot of charity, but he was also like very proud about giving that charity. That's right.
Yeah, that's a really important point. That's because, and even he had, do you remember when he saw the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he said, oh, you might remember me. You probably have heard about me. Like, hello, Haribol. But anyway, Krishna is so kind, isn't he? So kind. He's still, even though King Riga was pious and giving his charity for his own personal benefit, still Krishna was kind to him because he was following a correct process. And after King Riga, Lord Balaram decides to visit Vrindavan. So now we'll start with that. But that was an important point about King Riga, that he still retained an abhiman, a conception of himself as a great person. And that's why he wasn't able to exactly like directly go back to Godhead after seeing Krishna. He had to develop his prema in the proper mood, his attitude in the proper mood of humble servant of the Lord. And so he didn't stick around. He offered his obeisances and then went back. Okay, chapter 21, Lord Balaram. Does someone like to start the reading? Yes, go right ahead. Thanks.
In Dwarka one day, Lord Balaram grew keen to see the many friends he'd known so well throughout his infancy. He called a royal chariot and mounted it alone to journey to Vrindavan, his beloved childhood home. The residents of Dwarka were thoroughly aware. The residents of Vraj loved Krishna far beyond compare. They thought, if Krishna stays and Balaram sees them instead, both we and they may live, if they are not already dead. Indeed, the pain of separation plagued the cowherd folk, and when Lord Balaram arrived, his joyful parents spoke, "O Master of creation, as your foster dad and mother, may we be kept from harm by you and by your younger brother."
Let someone else read, please. I'll just go. Continue on.
Lord Balaram gave deep respects to all the senior men and took respects presented by his junior friends and kin. With handshakes, folded palms, embraces, nods, sweet words, and smiles, Lord Balaram met everyone in tasteful, fitting style. Lord Balaram refreshed himself, returned, and sitting down, accepted many questions from the cowherds gathered round. Their voices shaking out of love, they asked about the health of Krishna and the Yadus and Balaram himself.
Continue, someone continue, please. Just go around, if that's okay.
By fortune comes the diet along with other enemies, and Krishna built our relatives a fortress in the sea. Dear Balaram, are all the Yadus doing well again? Do some of you discuss and think about us now and then? The gopis asked Lord Balaram with suitable respect, is Krishna happy with the city girls as we suspect? Does he recall his father and his mother? Will he come? Does he recall his gopis and the service we have done?
Continue. Just take one, everyone go around.
For Krishna, we abandon every person we held dear, and how does he reciprocate? He simply disappeared. How did these learned city women give him so much trust? No doubt his words enchant them and his smile arouse their lust. Why don't we change the subject? Please do not bring up his name. He can live without us. Let us simply do the same. Remembering his laughter, his embraces, and his eyes, the gopis thought of Krishna and gave in to mournful cries.
Mishta?
Expert in conciliation, Balaram replied, I have some confidential news for you that Krishna has supplied. As Balaram repeated all his brother's secret words, the gopis felt relief and comfort, pleased with what they heard. As weeks went by, the people of Vrindavan felt restored. Lord Balaram went out at night as Krishna had before. He danced with certain gopis who at that time were too young to come for Krishna's rasa dance and join the moonlight fun.
Caressed by fragrant breezes with his girlfriends left and right, Lord Balaram enjoyed the Yamuna, those pleasantness. The god of Varuna sent a drink that flowed from honeyed trees, a heavenly intoxicating brew called Varuni.
That aromatic beverage perfumed the nighttime sky, attracting Balaram and his companions to imbibe. Gandharvas sang, and Balaram appeared to be the great Airavata, the elephant, surrounded by his mates.
The gods played kettle drums and showered flowers in their glee. The sages praised Lord Balaram's divine heroic deeds. As Balaram and many girlfriends stood there for a stroll, the Varuni appeared to make his eyes begin to roll.
Intoxicated with delight, adorned with forest lays, Lord Balaram felt beads of sweat like snowflakes on his face. He called the Yamuna to come and cool his entourage, but Yamuna, who thought him drunk, refused to even budge.
Enraged, Lord Balaram brought forth his famous fearsome plow and said, if you don't come, I'll redirect you right here and now. You disregard my order and move only at your whim.
My plow shall make 100 streams of you. Shall I begin?
The frightened river goddess who then came and bowed her head was simply an expansion of the one that Krishna wed. With trembling voice that Yamuna said, Rama, hear me first. I didn't understand that you sustained the universe. Release me from your mighty plow, O greatest of the great. Not knowing your position, I did not cooperate. I come before you humble, now accept me if you please, as one of your surrendered and committed devotees.
Releasing Yamuna with all his gopi friends in tow, the elephant-like Balaram stepped in her crystal flow. He splashed his girlfriends, they splashed back, and when their play was through, the goddess Lakshmi gave him gems and silks of ocean blue.
Drawn with silks and jewelry and fragrant sandal paste, resplendent Balaram observed the channels he had placed. In Yamuna, when he refused to let her keep away, a visitor can see those channels to this very day.
For 60 evenings, Balaram enjoyed Vrindavan's mood, the beauty and exquisite charm the gopis all exude. Their constant fun together filled his mind with great delight. To Balaram, it seemed to pass as if a single night.
Paundraka, While Balaram enjoyed his trip, a certain foolish king named Paundraka decided, I'm the lord of everything. The flattery of childish men had swelled his empty head. The fool dispatched to Dwarka a messenger who said, O Krishna, Paundraka, my king, has sent me here. It seems that you have failed to understand that he is the supreme. He is in fact Lord Vasudev, the one and only God. He has come to show his grace. You must stop your facade.
He orders you to bow to him. You must also desist from using his four symbols, conch shell, lotus club, and disc. Do not ignore his warning, for he ordered me to say, I'll crush you if you don't stop imitating me today.
I'm gonna start over here then. Oh, that's okay, thanks.
King Agrippina and other members of the Yadu court could not refrain from laughing at Paundraka's famed report. Lord Krishna sat enjoying all the laughter by and by. He called Paundraka's messenger, dictating this reply.
Yes, I'll release these symbols as you impudently said, especially my disc, which shall remove your foolish head. Then you can grace the vultures, hawks, and dogs that gather round to worship and adore you as they eat you on the ground.
Purusha, the messenger, conveyed these taunting words, and Purusha said, the unforeseen occurred. His friend, the king of Kali, and Purusha, then my eyes are not good. Then the guests were shocked to see Lord Krishna and his army battle dressed.
The mighty warrior Paundraka attacked with 2 divisions. The king of Kashi brought 3 more to hold the rear position. King Paundraka wore Krishna's crown, insignia, and dress. He flew Lord Krishna's flag and showed his mark upon his chest.
Lord Krishna laughed and laughed to see this duplicate appear, who looked just like an actor dressed in someone else's gear. When Paundraka's militia hurled weapons and attacked, Lord Krishna neutralized them all and drove the soldiers back. Dismembered soldiers, camels, steeds, and elephants all fell. It looked as though Lord Shiva danced and bid the earth farewell. Across the blood-soaked battlefield, his enemy disgraced, Lord Krishna turned to Paundraka and told him face to face, when the universe ends, Lord Shiva performs a dance of destruction.
Thanks.
Dear Paundraka, did your pronouncement not include a list of symbols I am to relinquish, starting with the disc? I now renounce my disc, O fool, by sharing it with you. Now you renounce my name, which you so stupidly assume.
As mountain peaks go soaring off from Indra's thunderbolts, the head of Paundraka flew off, concluding his revolt. The king of Kashi, who had vowed to cut off Krishna's head, confronted Krishna next and had his own removed instead.
By imitating Krishna, this Paundraka grew absorbed in contemplating all the lovely features of the Lord. Paundraka was thus purified and gained his liberation, while Krishna traveled homeward to a blissful celebration.
Lord Krishna's arrows, having plucked the head of Kashi's king, had flown it back to Kashi as if it had sprouted wings. The citizens of Kashi gathered around it in a throng and asked, "What is this object and to whom does it belong?"
They saw it had some earrings and assumed it was a head. They thought it must be Krishna, whom their king had wanted dead. On recognizing what it really was, they knelt and cried, "Oh, who will give us shelter now? Our mighty king has died."
Sudakshina. The king of Kashi's eldest son, Sudakshina by name, performed his father's funeral and, in his mind, proclaimed, "I must track down his killer and avenge my dear deceased." Sudakshina then worshipped Shiva, aided by his priests.
The powerful Lord Shiva, in a pleased, commanding voice, presented Sudakshina with the blessing of his choice. The prince requested Shiva to endow him with the means to kill his father's killer, so his name could be redeemed.
Lord Shiva said, "There is a sacred ritual designed to vanquish all the foes of the Brahminically inclined. The sacrificial fire will itself destroy such men." Sudakshina, on hearing this, was eager to begin.
The sacrificial fire, as the priest performed the rite, rose up and took a human form, a most horrific sight. The fearsome naked creature had a beard of molten ore, a flaming trident, furrowed brow, and fangs designed to bore.
On legs as long as royal palms, the monster ran away. Accompanied by ghosts, he scourged the country all the way to Dwaraka, his destination. There the people saw a hellish beast approaching, which they watched with fear and awe.
Distraught, the people cried to Krishna, "Save us from this fire. That flaming beast will turn our lovely city to a pyre." Lord Krishna, who was playing dice, as monarchs sometimes do, just laughed at their alarm and said, "I'll surely rescue you."
Almighty Krishna understood the giant fiery beast had come from Shiva's sacrificial rites, so he released Sudarshan, his fiery disc, which blazed like countless suns. Its heat at once turned back the beast and put it on the run.
The fiery beast, defeated by Lord Krishna, had no choice. When curses are reversed, they fall on him who used his voice. Speak them in the first place. Thus empowered to destroy, the demon turned on them who had put them in their employ.
Sudakshina was shocked at the arrival of the beast, who quickly burned his boss to death along with all his priests. Those men who challenge God in a demoniac crusade end up annihilated by the weapons they have made.
The disc burned the entire town of Kashi down as well, converting all its buildings to infernos out of hell. Sudarshan departed from that smoldering disaster, returning to the side of his eternal graceful master.
A person who recounts his gallant pastime of the Lord or hears it with attention will attain a great reward, release from countless lifetimes of accumulated sin, and freedom from the punishment of taking birth again.
Okay, let's just pause here for a minute because it's a lot of story here and just make a few comments. So going back to the first story, nice, calm, quiet, beautiful atmosphere in Vrindavan when Lord Balaram goes to visit the gopis after having not seen them for many years. What can you remember about that story? Some things about that story of Balaram visiting the gopis. Let's talk about that first. Any impressions you had? Yes, Prabhu. Microphone's right near you. It's all right.
Well,
That's a deep subject. Sorry. Well, sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, Lord Balaram was asked about Lord Krishna and his city girls. They're like, so distinguished and, very high class and they're wondering, like, is he pleased by them? Because, he's not pleased by us. He left us.
Yeah. Other things that you remember about Balaram visiting the gopis in Vrindavan after a long time?
Well, it's funny, like
You'll break the rules. You'll break your own rules. Can you pass the mic forward, please? Thanks. He's the one who makes the rules.
It's funny how all they, even when Uddhava came, they first ask about Krishna and then they say that, oh, we don't need to talk about him. Like if you can live without us, we can also do the same. So they just like going back and forth. They just cannot stop talking about Krishna. But that's their, I don't know what kind of mood you would say that, oh, we don't need to talk about him, and let's keep talking about it.
They're trying to forget Krishna. We have the opposite struggle in our lives. Have you noticed that? They're so absorbed in love for Krishna that they can't think of anything else and they can't do anything else. They can't even keep up with things. Now, sometimes we can't keep up with things, but not for the same problem, not for the same, thinking of Krishna. But anyway, they're so absorbed in Krishna that they often say to each other, what? If Krishna can forget about us and go off to Mathura, he left Vrindavan just on like a moment's notice practically. Who was the messenger who came in and took him out of Mathura, out of Vrindavan? Akrura. Akrura, not cruel. Akrura means not cruel. But he took Krishna out of Vrindavan. So the gopis were so offended by that Akrura came to take Krishna away, that they never thought very highly of Akrura, we could say, And back to the present story. So when the gopis are talking among themselves, Krishna could forget us so easily. They're thinking that he forgot them. That's because it appears to them that he forgot them. But why can't we forget him? We don't want to talk about him, but we can't forget him. Everything comes back to him. Even we try to forget him, he's there. So we could pray for that same type of, absorption that they have. And how is it that they become so absorbed in Krishna? They become attracted by his personality, by his personal characteristics, by his loving exchanges. And so similarly, the very first verse of Srimad Bhagavatam explains to us, first 3 verses, they explain that Krishna is so attractive that all we have to do is hear about him. Just hear about him and his activities. And that'll cleanse our heart of the misconceptions that we have. It'll bring about attraction and attachment for Krishna. And it will totally change the whole course of our material life into a course for spiritual life. And simply by that process of hearing about Krishna. Prabhupada says in the purport, not in that particular part, but in another part in the Bhagavatam, he says, if human reason fails to understand how by hearing about Krishna and by serving the devotees and serving the Lord, that one can become attracted, but it happens. And perhaps all of you have experienced it to some degree, or just are stepping into that ocean of remembrance and developing attraction for Krishna. And you'll see, as you apply yourself to those basic principles of keep hearing about Krishna as much as you can in his different activities and his different characteristics and so forth. And more you'll become more and more attracted. Other things about, yes, Cynthia.
What I really like about this pastime is that Balaram gets kind of intoxicated with Varuni and then has his own rasa dance. And then he's like, oh, I want to, let's all play in the Yamuna. And Yamuna is like, go home, you're drunk. And then Balaram is like, no, I have this plow. And so he kind of threatens her. And then she's like, oh, I'm sorry. I totally didn't realize who you were. My mistake. Let's all play together, and it's just a very charming pastime.
It's very interesting, isn't it? And it's very sweet how Krishna immediately, as soon as Yamuna, offers her prayers and her apologies, everything's, Balaram's totally fine. He's not holding a grudge. He's not, degrading her. He's not, and that's how Krishna is with all of us. He's there sitting in the heart of the living entity. There's the individual, the Jivatma in the heart, and the Paramatma, the Lord. And he's just waiting for us to turn towards him. And once we turn to him, even a little bit, even hesitatingly, oh, this is a little interesting. Let me check it out. Or as you get more and more interested, yes, I want to dedicate my total energy and in trying to develop a spiritual consciousness, but even just a little bit of attention towards Krishna, and Krishna immediately takes charge of our life. Thanks. Any other little points that you remember, or big points, Priya?
This is a small point, but it's nice. I liked how the residents of Dwarka, they were aware that the residents of Raj were suffering a lot in Krishna's absence. So they were thinking, well, we can't just let them die out of separation. So someone has to go, but if Krishna goes, then we'll die out of separation. So like, all right, let's send Balaram.
Yeah. Nice. Okay, so going on to our next story about Paundraka. Let's hear a little bit, a synopsis of Paundraka's story before you forget Paundraka's situation. Remember his unusual situation, Paundraka?
Yeah, so he's an imposter. He pretends to be the Supreme Lord Vishnu and sends dispatch to Krishna to say, hey, give up your imposterism by pretending to be me. And I just have this picture of like Raggedy Ann cloth arms that he pastes on to give the extra 2 arms.
You just dated yourself there, but it's okay.
Anyway.
I know what you mean. Oh, sorry. Okay. It's okay. Continue, please.
So, Krishna doesn't take too kindly to that. So they have it out. And
in the Krishna book, when Prabhupada's narrating the story a little fuller, all the essential points are here in Kalakanta's poetic rendition. But in Krishna book, it says when because the messenger came in while Krishna was seated in the assembly of the Yadu dynasty, so the messenger came in and said, Paundraka, blah, blah, blah. And he said that the members of the Yadu dynasty laughed very loudly for a considerable time. Okay, any other points, or continue on the points that you remember about Paundraka? Who was his friend? Paundraka had an ally, King of Kasi. So I'm kind of jumping ahead, but just testing your memory. I'm sure it's way better than mine. But when the battle, when Krishna came before him, and Paundraka had how many Oxahini and how many did Kasi have? Paundraka had 2. Kashi had 3. And where were Kashi's Oxahinis situated? Yeah, they were taking up the rear. Yeah, in case anybody was going to get away, they were going to get them. Okay, but anyway, other points about Paundraka? Oh yeah, please. Thanks.
It's just interesting that he was accusing Krishna of exactly what he was doing, imitating.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we do the same. Sometimes we see faults in others that we are actually ashamed to admit, or that we feel guilty about, and we're pointing them out in other people.
That's a really good point. Thanks for bringing that up. And in fact, if you consider that point about how the faults that we see in others are the faults that we have ourselves, because if we didn't have that fault, how could we see it? We see it because we have it. I believe it's Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Maharaj, Srila Prabhupada's spiritual master, who says something to the effect of, how can I see faults in others when I myself am honeycombed with faults? Is that Bhaktisiddhanta or Bhaktivinoda? Yeah, that's him. Some great personality. How can I see faults in others when I myself am honeycombed? In other words, I got plenty of holes in me, honeycomb, with faults. Yeah, and so, and interestingly enough, it was obviously quite a meditation for Paundraka, wasn't it? He was totally absorbed in thinking that. And it's not mentioned here, but at Paundraka, after Krishna was playing catch with Paundraka and said, here, catch my Sudarshan chakra if you can, catch it if you can. And it happened to just cut off his head in no time. Paundraka was liberated. He was liberated and to the position of Sayuja Mukti, where he was, took on the same form as Krishna. Huh?
Sarupya.
That one, Sarupya, Rupa, yeah, form, thank you. That's what he wants. Yeah, but interestingly, it is quite seamless, but at the same time, it's a total different state of consciousness. He was purified because he was killed by Krishna. Normally, someone who has a mentality of imitation like that, where they're thinking they're absorbed in themselves, and therefore not qualified to enter the spiritual world where Krishna is the center. He's, and everyone's absorbed in service to him in different relationships and different mellows or moods. But because he had that rare opportunity to be personally killed by the Lord, then it was all purified, and then immediately dovetail. Yes, Prabhu.
Just had a thought that, yeah, some people they'll call themselves God in their own way, but this guy called himself Krishna. So like he had to meditate on his form.
Yes.
And he had to meditate on like his activities and stuff. And
yes.
So it was like a different kind of like,
yeah,
I just came across that.
Good point. Right. Papa Kriya Prabhu?
I was thinking that it's kind of the same as Kamsa. You know, he was always meditating on Krishna. He's fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness, but in an unfavorable way. And then they both got killed by Krishna. But then I was just also reflecting on how, you know, people that are so just kind of bad, you know, and bad character and full of envy and all these bad qualities. And then they just get purified so quickly just by zoop, getting their head cut off. And then here we are like trying to do bhakti for so many years and sometimes lifetimes. And these guys just immediately, you know, from the lowest to like form of Lord Vishnu in the spiritual world. So how are they so lucky like that?
Because it's not by chance. They're not, they're, to be in Krishna's pastime to begin with, there's a certain level of qualification. Not just any contaminated personality is there exchanging with Krishna. So that's one thing. So they have great qualification to a certain degree, not like a whole slate of Kali Yuga and millions of other yugas of impious atheistic activities. So they have, it's sometimes in that regard, the Garga Samhita is very informative to tell who people were in their last lives. So they were qualified to they had certain pious credits to but not complete piety. That's how I can explain it. Swaminath Basu Prabhu, would you like to add anything? Sorry. Okay. Anyone else like to add anything to that very nice question? Other points?
Point about like different people and like different things in the past lives. That's how they could appear in Krishna's pastimes. Seems like if we say everything happens by Krishna's like arrangement. So maybe he like seems like he had all these people to fit into this story so that could create some like there's a lot of different elements in his whole pastimes and art. Of course, they're in by chance. Like he's the main director who like gathered all these different people to make it a nice.
Yeah.
Based on their previous activities.
Yeah, he's the main director, and he has his agents who I actually might even be called a Canto Prabhu. Says that Krishna, he writes the script, he directs the play, and he's all of the actors too, you know, so he's got it all together, you could say. But then he also has his agents, Yogamaya, who arranges the different personalities to come in and out to make enhance the rasa, to enhance the relationship. Okay, back to Paundraka. Any other things? Would you like to add something? Is that a raised hand or just a, no, it's not really raised, right? It's just a resting hand. Okay, all right. Just giving you a chance in case you'd like to. Would anyone else like to remember some parts of Paundraka's experience that might have struck you in a way, or even just that you can remember? Yes.
I thought the part at the end about the King Akashi's head getting cut off and then like flying over to his citizens and his citizens being like, oh, what's this? Oh, it's a head. It must be Krishna's head. Wait, no, it's like, yeah. I thought that was very funny.
Do you remember, does somebody remember some other pastime of somebody cutting off somebody's head and having it fly to a certain spot? Yeah,
Is it Canto? He had this boom that whoever cuts off whoever makes his head fall on the ground, that person's head would burst to pieces.
right.
So Arjuna very dexterously cut off the head with an arrow, but it flew off. That arrow took it all the way to his, I believe it was his grandfather's
Father.
meditating up in the mountains. And so when the sage
Landed in his lap in
That-
his meditation.
yeah,
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, he saw the ghastly cut off head and he just got up and made the head roll on the ground. Spotted head. Pieces.
Yeah, that's a level of talent in archery or in fighting that you don't see very often, that you can simultaneously cut the head off and then make enough arrows that it shoots over to a certain area. But yeah, another thing.
Yeah, I think before this battle between Paundraka and Krishna, and so Paundraka and Kashi were allies. And I think Paundraka had made some statement that I promise you, he made a promise to Kashi. He said, I promise you that, before the end of the day, you're going to see Krishna's head rolling in the streets of your city, something like that. And so that's why they thought it was Krishna's head when they saw it head rolling. That's why Krishna arranged that Paundraka's head roll down the street.
Kashi, Paundraka's head didn't, it was.
Oh, sorry, Kashi's head. Sorry, I got confused.
Yeah, but it's
Yeah,
okay.
I think
Same effect.
then it was him. There was, I'm not
Yeah.
remembering correctly, but there was something like that. Then it
Right.
must have been Kashi. He declared to his citizens that Krishna's head's gonna roll in the street,
Yeah.
and then his own head rolled.
And just a flash, as you were talking about heads rolling, this is where, everything has a connection to the Vedic literature. We have that little phrase, our heads are gonna roll today, watch out, the boss is in a bad mood. But, that's where it comes, it has a connection, you can make that little connection. Anytime. Okay, let's read about Vida, and then I think that's the end of our chapter. Okay, so we'll do our just due diligence. Would you like to start? Yes, thank you.
Dear Shukadev said,
Words, but we want to make vida. Okay.
Dear Shukadev, said Vishnurata, is there more to hear of Balaram's achievements in Vrindavan's atmosphere? I crave that wondrous taste with which his pastimes are imbued. As God, his actions have no limit. What else did he do?
A servant of Lord Ramachandra, Dvida by name, fell in with Baumasura and was thoroughly defamed. This hairy ape, upset by Bauma's death, ransacked the land, destroying homes and villages completely out of hand.
He tore up mountains, using them to slaughter peaceful towns. He churned the sea so mightily that coastal people drowned. He spoiled sacred rites when he passed urine, gas, and stool, and shut up helpless people in dark caves. He was that cruel.
One day, Dvida, primed for rape and other violent ills, heard sweet, attractive singing in the Raibataka hills. He came upon Lord Balaram absorbed in luscious play with lovely gopis drinking Varuni from pots of clay.
Lord Balaram wore lotuses on every handsome limb, with drinks and songs and rolling eyes and gopis circling him. The mischievous Vida scrambled up a nearby tree and sounded out Kila, Kila in vulgar mockery.
The gopis started giggling at the impudent display, for as young girls, they tended to behave in silly ways. Without regard for Balaram, the ape displayed his teeth. He turned around, bent over, and displayed his underneath.
You just pictured that. Okay, so go ahead.
Disgusted, Balaram picked up a rock and let it fly. The crafty ape avoided it and in a rude reply, picked up the pot of Varuni and smashed it to the ground. He pulled the gopi's clothing and produced offensive sounds.
Lord Balaram despised these acts. He also understood dispatching at this wicked 8, Jews were planted good. But as the Lord picked up his club, Dvivida broke a tree and brought it down on Balaram with great dexterity.
Lord Balaram stood motionless despite the heavy blow and struck Vivida's skull so hard that blood began to flow. Vivida snapped another tree and stripped it with his arms, but Balaram just splintered it, again avoiding harm.
The scene went on again and yet again to all around. The forest had grown treeless, so they fought on naked ground. The angry ape released a rain of rocks on Balaram, who smashed each one to pebbles with his club, remaining calm.
The furious Dvivida chose to foolishly persist by beating Balaram directly with his primate fists. Disposing of his club, Lord Balaram employed his hand to strike a single crushing blow the ape could not withstand.
Vivida crumpled to a heap and bid his life farewell. An earthquake wobbled
Vaivataka.
Vaivataka mountain as he fell. Lord Balaram returned to home as people sang with love. The earth rejoiced, as did the sages, saints, and gods above.
Are we supposed to go to the next one too? That one, that's what's going on, right? Hare Krishna. So there's a few important points here in this very short little story about Dvivida. Do you remember the very first introduction we had about who Dvivida was? And that's verse 48. Look at verse 48. What's there in that verse 48? One of you in, yeah, Lord Ramachandra. Dvivida he was in Ramachandra's pastimes. Now that wasn't the day before, right? Lord Ramachandra appeared in Treta Yuga. Yeah. And Krishna's in Dwapara Yuga. So that's, countless, I don't know, millions of years later. So he was there associating with Lord Ramachandra and the other monkey soldiers in that battle, Lord Ram's battle against Ravan. And what happened? Why is he now a demon? Bad association. Bad association with atheistic personalities, bad personalities. So perhaps you've heard a few times, association is very important. Who you associate with is very important because it affects your consciousness. I remember, and I probably mentioned this before, back when I was younger, my mother used to say, show me who your friends are and I'll tell you what you are. And I used to think, why are you talking like that for? Because, but now I can understand the correlation a few years later. Took me a little while. Yeah. Even, thank you for pointing that out. Gopal saying every religion says that same thing. Association is really important. And even you can remember in the Srimad Bhagavatam, in a very short little story about King Suyagya, I believe was his name, when the wives, anyway, Hiranyakashipu and Hiranyaksha were somehow or other related, preaching to the wives. And he said, Hiranyakashipu said, association is like a crystal stone. It reflects whatever it's near. So that's how sensitive our consciousness is. And that's how one has to consciously make an endeavor to associate with personalities or with an atmosphere that's going to bring you up as opposed to bring you down. It's a subtle but very, very important point to understand from all different aspects. Okay, what else happened to Dvivida? When did he come in contact with Balaram? Can you say that a little louder?
Balaram was hanging out
Balaram was associating with the gopis. You're right. Good. And they were dancing. And then Dvivida taught. What were some of the accomplishments that Dvivida had done in the area to show his strength?
Made tsunamis with his arms.
Yeah. tsunamis with his arms by churning the ocean. He would lock it in one place and flood it in another place.
He would put like innocent people in caves.
Oh, yeah, he would put innocent people in caves and lock them up. And again, in Krishna book, it says like the bringy insect. And here in Florida, we have an insect that we call locally, we call them the mud dauber. You see sometimes little mud cocoons. If you ever like, they love to do like on the side of picture frames and corners to make so they only need to make 3 sides or whatever. Mud cocoons. If you break those little cocoons, there's just a bunch of dead insects in there. That's their stash for the winter or stash for the that's their cupboard dead bodies. So like the bringy insect, he would lock people and shut them up in caves and close the door. They couldn't get out, and then he would go back and feast on him. Anything else that you remember Vita's activities?
Dust, urine, gas, and stool.
He did, didn't he? Where? I mean, that everybody does that, but in different places, right? But where did he do that? That made it such a disturbance.
Like yeah.
Oh, all over the Brahmins, the sacrificial arenas.
Wow, that's a statement, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah, and also he would pollute the women. He would rape women and, many aristocratic young girls. Amazing. Okay, so when he comes up to Balaram, who's dancing, what's his reaction? What did he do? Where did he go? There was a particular instance in the beginning, how he climbed a tree. And what was the sound he made?
Kila, kila.
Kila. And then what are some of the other things that he did when he saw the gopis?
Clothes.
Yeah, I pulled their clothes. Showed his bottom. And he also, did his monkey tooth thing, showed his teeth. And their reaction was, they just laughed, kind of, sort of, until he started to pull on their clothes. Then they cried, pleaded to Krishna or Balaram to save them.
And he broke the pot of Ernie.
Oh my gosh, that's a real defiant attitude, isn't it? Oh my gosh, Hare Krishna. And now how about some lessons, take homes, thoughts for the day when you think of what you heard in your Bhagavatam class? What are some things you're going to remember? Yes, Prabhu. Here.
I forget his name, but the son of the king imitated Krishna, and then he created his fierce demon. And one of Kalikanta Prabhu's verses said that those who challenge God in a demoniac crusade end up being destroyed by the very weapons that they made.
Yeah.
So it made me think there's different ways of having a crusade against God. You can physically imitate him and pronounce that you're God, but there's also more subtle ways. And our modern world and our scientific glories and achievements is one way of kind of denouncing God, because God gives us a certain system that's very harmonious, living simply in harmony with the earth. But of course, we're very proud of how we can manipulate material nature with our mental prowess, but we end up just destroying ourselves and destroying everything.
Very good point. Thanks. And Srila Prabhupada gives some examples of that very same thing, how we've made so much, advancement and material comforts, but we're plagued by that. So he would give a simple point. He said, so we've developed so many cars and we can go from here to there in no time. Or actually his example was a plane. And we can go from New York to London in a few hours. He said, but to get to the airport takes 3 hours because there's so many cars, And then because there's so many cars, then we have to keep building more and more roadways and probably we call them flyways, crossovers and totally then we have to pass laws for pollution control, and then we have to et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But somehow or other, we still think, we're making lots of progress, we're really advanced. But when it comes down to it, we're actually totally tortured by the advancement that we make. in so many different ways. And surrender to Krishna helps a lot on that aspect. Yes, final words.
The pastime of Dvivida kind of feels like a warning to not misinterpret the rasa dance and Lord Balaram and Lord Krishna's pastimes with the gopis. It seems like Dvivida is sort of represents like a person of mundane mentality who is like, oh, well, like God did all these things with young girls and like got drunk and like danced, and so I can do that too. But if you have that mundane mentality and you try to imitate or you try to judge the Lord, then you just end up being a really stupid ape who gets smashed by Lord Balaram. So
Everything you said is totally correct. And then the other amazing thing is that even the Lord is so kind that even if a person is in that position of illusion, still he'll purify you. So as you go through your sojourn of life, and especially your sojourn in spiritual consciousness and Krishna consciousness, you'll have your ups and downs, guaranteed. Okay, we'd like to emphasize the ups, but the downs are also there. The challenges are also there. But if we can remember some of these points about Krishna, we're never without the highest guidance and without the highest hope. Krishna is always willing and able. That's another thing too. Willing is one thing, but able to rectify anyone and purify anyone, engage them in their highest service. And another thing that I'm just waiting for the door to open. Is that okay? Oh, so I'm over time. Okay, just one thing about reading the pastimes and hearing the pastimes from the 10th canto. We're hearing these amazing stories. And if this is where you're entering into Krishna consciousness, you might be thinking, huh? This is God. But we had 10 whole other volumes, 10 whole other cantos to prepare us about Krishna's abilities and potencies and everything so that we could understand his personal activities. So in your spare time, you can read all the previous 10 cantos. Hare Krishna. Thank you very kindly. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.